Previously on the Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
You know, I've been pre-programmed since I was very young. My parents would tell me, you can study whatever you want. In the end, you're going to come back and work with your father anyway. Is your business plan correct? Is the value you're adding truly a value? And it's not a value in the mind of the entrepreneur. You have to look at it from the mind of the consumer or the people who will buy your product or service.
It's nefarious, man. Like, the brain works in fucked up ways.
The mind is one of the most deceiving, manipulative pieces of equipment, flesh, human bodies on earth. I never have trusted my brain.
All of that weight lives in your head, and you are the decision maker.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
Hi, it's Ronsley. If this is your first volume, welcome. This is a weekly series where I go inside the mind of an entrepreneur, artist, athlete, academic to decipher what is the psychology of our decisions. I'm Australian, and I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians throughout Australia and recognizing their continuing connection to land, waters, and community. I pay my respects to them and their cultures and to elders past, present, and emerging of the land I'm standing on today. I extend my respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who listen to this podcast. In the middle of a global pandemic, if there is one story that just needed to be heard, actually, it was just begging to be heard, it is from my next guest. Because of how quickly things are changing, I asked him to tell us the date and place of our interview.
Graham Skroo Turner. I'm CEO of Flight Centre Travel Group, and it's the 30th of October, I think. We're on the 15th floor of the Flight Centre building in South Bank, Brisbane.
Well, I know you must be thinking that this whole podcast is about how a global travel company is responding to the global pandemic. I want to align things a little bit because I've known Skroo Turner for a while and the man he actually is. So, for you listening, Jude Turner and Graham Skroo Turner have been married for 40 years. And I love advice from people that I look up to. So, Skroo, I've always wanted to ask you about long-lasting relationships.
When you've been married 40 years, it's really important you get on well together, which might be really obvious. But, when you first meet your partner and that it's very exciting and all that sort of thing. And certainly having kids is I think is really important, and grandkids now, because we've got 3 grandkids, and that's just fantastic. And we're going to London. Jude and I are going to London next month or early December for 3 weeks, and there are some challenges there. We've got to get permission. I've got to get permission to leave, and we'll possibly have to quarantine in a hotel. Coming back here, I need to go to New York as well from London, and you can't actually do that at the moment, but it looks like that's coming back. So, having the grandkids is quite a motivator too, and I think sharing your life with kids and grandkids is really important. But in the end, having somewhat similar interests, getting on well. Accepting there's going to be a few ups and downs.
Okay, that is a bit of context about the man. Here is context about the business he built and what they are currently dealing with.
Flight Centre's been going now for just under 40 years, 38 years, I think. And with Top Deck, that was nearly 50 years ago. But we've never had anything like this in our history before, anything like it. Whereas, a business that's been built up over the last 38 years, pretty suddenly is a third of the size it was, 8 months ago, and with 2/3, 70% less people with very little business, and basically in a survival mode. You can call it hibernation, but because there's so little travel happening in the world.
Here is news from 6 months ago by the BBC that shared this.
Well, this pandemic and the lockdowns that have followed were always going to take an incredible toll on the travel and tourism sector. Ros Atkins has more details on this. Hi, Ros.
Hi, Babita. Yes, as we've been watching this pandemic play out, of course, it's impacting on lots of different industries, travel being one of them. And today, Virgin Atlantic confirmed what we thought would be coming in some form. It's going to cut 3,000 jobs in the UK. It also says it won't restart its operations from Gatwick Airport. Bear in mind, they've been suspended since this pandemic began. First of all, let's hear the reaction of Erin Hazelhurst from BBC Business.
They're going to have to cut nearly 30% of their workforce, 3,150 jobs to go out of a workforce of some 10,000. This off the back of British Airways announcing not that long ago it may have to cut up to 12,000 jobs. And all of this in an environment where 80% flying has been reduced by 80% all around the world. There are some 17,000 passenger jets parked, mothballed all around at airports all over the world.
And then a month ago, DW News reported this.
It's the world's third largest industry, but that was before the COVID-19 pandemic brought tourism to a screeching halt. That's been especially hard for Europe, the world's #1 travel destination in years past. Tourism brought regular surpluses to European budgets. Border shutdowns and restrictions have shown just how many jobs are dependent on foreign visitors. And it's not just airlines and tourism companies, but also hotels, cafes, and businesses, all dependent on bustling travel. But with the full coffers of the past, also came growing tensions across Europe. Higher living costs, gentrification, and frustrations for locals in many cities, like here in Barcelona, but also Venice and Amsterdam. Will tourism ever bounce back to its pre-pandemic highs? And could this extended off-season be an opportunity to rethink travel for the future?
The travel industry was hit hard throughout this pandemic. Combining the loss in revenue of each country, the financial impact of COVID-19 on global tourism has resulted in a total revenue loss of $195 billion worldwide so far.
So, for more context, here is a report by the News in Australia on June 19th, 2020.
In a glimmer of hope for the struggling economy, consumers are emerging out of coronavirus hibernation. Spending surged by a record 16.3% in May, thanks largely to increased sales in retail and hospitality. And it's hoped the tourism industry will be next. Jetstar today slashed the cost of flights, its website buckling under the pressure, with 220 tickets sold every minute.
$19 tickets for 10,000 travellers sold out in just 4 hours. Jetstar heavily discounting flights, while Qantas offered triple points for frequent flyers in an effort to hit go on a near-grounded industry.
Right now, when you've got planes on the ground and you've got people who've not got any work to do, it's about bringing cash into the business.
Queensland is yet to announce its border opening date. The sale fares there kick in after July 10, with some uncertainty remaining.
If plans do change, and they could, then that's why we've built this flexibility option in.
Near empty check-in desks. It's something our airlines have become somewhat used to in the last 3 months. But Qantas and Jetstar very much hope these deals will change all that, aiming for 40% capacity by the end of July.
Thousands of passengers means thousands of jobs, pilots and crew coming back to work, but not all. And there are calls for JobKeeper payments to be extended for tourism industry workers until next March.
We can't recover until we can get international visitors back into the country. Your average Chinese visitor probably spends about $8,500 while they're here, whereas your average Aussie tourist probably spends about $1,500 if we're lucky.
As planes return to the skies, the government has given the ACCC extra powers to keep a close eye on airlines, making sure competition remains.
If Virgin was not to emerge, was not to survive, it will be a very long time before we have another airline competing with Qantas. That would leave Qantas as a monopoly.
Lizzie Pearl, 9 News.
We're in 23 countries, and some countries are a bit different. South Africa's coming back reasonably well with domestic travel mainly. Even India, there's quite a few destinations that are open now, and domestic travel's there, but it's still well down. And you feel really sorry for the people that aren't here anymore, because it's not going to be easy to get for the sort of people that we have to get the sort of jobs that they probably deserve. And a lot of these people have mortgages and young families and that too. So, as a business, it's tough, but it's tough for a lot of our people as well. That's the really bad thing.
Flight Centre Travel Group is in 23 countries, and Skroo Turner has built this multi-billion-dollar-a-year company from scratch, and has been doing this for over 50 years. He has dealt with a lot of global crises as CEO during that time, 9/11, Gulf War. How is this different?
If you remember September 11, the outcome from that was also it hit travel, only for a relatively short period, but the end result of that was ramped up security. It's hard to believe, but that you didn't have X-ray machines that you put baggage through and have fluids at 100 mil and all this sort of thing. And we adapted pretty quickly to that, but it did change. The security at airports and on aeroplanes and that changed. They had proper doors into the cabins, the pilot's area. And I suspect it'll be the same. This is going to change the way we travel, but we'll adapt pretty quickly, I think. And that's probably quite a good... and a lot of the airlines are already, and airports are already well down this track of what they need to do to cope with this sort of virus.
Passengers may proceed to the gate area for check-in.
Skroo, how did you find out what was happening? Do you remember when this news about the pandemic all came to light?
If you go back to when this started, we certainly didn't have a plan. I got back from London in March, 12th of March, I think I got back, and I think the next weekend it all sort of happened. And luckily I've got a team of people. There's 7 of us in what I call the task force. You've met Mel, and she was really instrumental in getting our war room set up, and we were here in the war room. It was actually this room for the next 6 or 8 weeks. Certainly every day during the week, and a certain amount of weekends. And the task force has Mel is she's CEO of Leisure now, Chris Galanti, CEO of Corporate, Adam Campbell, who you just met, who's our CFO, and then we have the MDs of Australia, EMEA, and North America, Charlene in North America, and Steve and James Kavanagh here.
That is some team. Notice the people behind the person. Skroo is 71 years old, or 71 years young. I think that's a better way to put it. And as long as I've known him, he has been active. And do you know what? I did not know that this 71-year-old was meant to run the London Marathon in 2020.
It's probably more exercise than sport, although I did play sport quite a lot and still do. Look, I think I was lucky. I grew up in a generation and a place where and around people who exercised, and it's the same with our kids. Probably because they've seen us generally exercise and all the time they're growing up, and as well as sport, that it seems to have rubbed off on them without never had to say anything to them. So it's, and obviously my parents were what they call frugals. So running just wasn't something you do, It's particularly if you're on a farm, your neighbours would think you'd gone absolutely nuts. So, but they were both, a little bit like your father, both of them were quite good sports people when they were younger, and so that rubbed off to a certain extent, even though they weren't, when we were growing up, they didn't really do, they might have played a bit of golf or bowls or things like that. But so I think that's the, and even now, I was meant to run the London Marathon this year, and it was cancelled, of course, in April, and I was quite relieved because my training wasn't wasn't up to scratch, and it was again meant to run in October, and it's been now it's on next April, so I'm going to have to start. And there's no doubt, as you get older, it becomes a lot harder, and you become more sensible,
When we come back, how he doesn't want the challenge that he has to deal with. But, well, I'll let him tell you.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
Our aim with this audio documentary has always been to build a strong community of entrepreneurs and creatives to provide a space where they can use their voice to share their authenticity with the world. As a valued listener, your voice matters too. We love to hear your feedback and ideas, so don't be shy to let us know how we're doing in the ratings and comments. If you have a message for our production team or know someone who would be a perfect fit as a guest, you can find out more information on how to share your input at psychologyofontrepreneurship.com.
Before the break, you would have gathered context for the situation we are in, the man we are speaking with, and the company he controls. Now, leadership.
I would have preferred not to have this challenge if you had the choice. But the challenge is here, and we just got to accept that it is a challenge. It's going to be a major thing. It is a major thing, and so we need to make the best of it, come out of it with a better business model, but in the meantime, trying to retain our IP, all of our top people and that sort of thing. So that is the challenge, and this is all caused by government restrictions, and not just a virus that's a contagious virus, but it's imagine if this virus was deadly to your average person. I mean, the flu, the Spanish flu in 1918, the average person, the age of people who died then was 28, and now the average person in Australia that dies is 85. So, and I'm not wishing old people, bad luck in that sense, because that probably applies to me almost. But it is a different situation. But it's the government restrictions, and who can blame them? It's politically, that's what they're doing for the political reasons as much as health reasons, and because that's what people expect of them.
Flight Centre has a very loyal workforce that have been with them for decades, not years, decades. And I've met a few of them.
We do have quite a few people who've been with us for, 20 or 30 years, and who've basically grown up with the company from early 20s. So it is going to be tough for them. But I think the one thing, and I know this, and I'm talking now particularly our operation in Australia, but in other countries, I think our people are well equipped to go into other roles and other jobs, and hopefully, and this is what we tell them, it's best for you to, we're not going to have a role for you for probably at least 12 months. You're best to go and get a job. A lot of our people are well equipped to get other roles, and then as we come back, we'd welcome you back, because we'll want people with the skills obviously in a year or two's time anyway. So that's the hope that we've got. But the timing, this is not a short-term thing. Originally I thought, we're going to be back to normal in 6 months or less. And now we're nowhere after 6 months, almost nowhere anyway.
Remember, Skroo was talking about his war room and the structure of his task force, which are the people that directly report to him. I wanted to know more about that.
We only have had this structure actually since 1st of January this year. And I think it's been a really good structure for us to really pull together. And giving credit to Mel on this, she took a lot of the leadership of the group in the early days in particular, but still now. And the structure's really been good for us to be able to cope with this. But to answer your original question, if someone had suggested that this sort of thing would happen, well, it's the sort of thing that you might read about it in a fiction book, but you just would not imagine it. And you would assume that by now we've got some solution that is clear and fairly, precise. The COVID-19, it's a very contagious disease. Luckily it's not too deadly, but it is. Yes, it's a very smart virus that we don't seem to be able to. It's not that serious, but it's serious enough to really disrupt just about everything.
So, with such a massive company, how does the changing landscape make you look at the positive side of business, Skroo?
With leisure, with Mel and corporate with Chris, they've really put a lot of time and effort into innovation, changing the models, improving the technology within cost restraints. And so both those areas will come out of this looking somewhat different. Certainly more productive, lower costs. And that was already really something we were working on anyway, particularly in leisure because our model is a relatively high cost model with real estate, with people, and that will still stay the same to a certain extent, but there will be less people, more technology to help us, more online or call centre type operations, and the same on the corporate side with Chris. He's worked with his guys on this long-term strategy. I mean, interesting enough, we're winning quite a lot of business, or certainly pre-COVID levels of business in corporate because, we do have an active presence in all our markets with our people and particularly in corporate travel. People coming back, companies want their people to be safe. They want to be sure that, they're travelling with advice of what's the best place, what safe to go to, hotels safe with the right COVID plans, as well as airlines and other things like that. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities coming out of this, but we've got to be able to travel reasonably freely first, or people aren't going to travel.
According to Health Minister Greg Hunt, the Australian overseas travel ban is expected to be in place until at least the 17th of December 2020. However, this could change depending on the status of the virus. At this point, Australia is working on forming travel bubbles with low-risk countries. The first one being formed on the 16th of October, with New Zealanders being able to travel to Australia without having to quarantine. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has stated that they won't consider letting Australians into their country until we have at least 28 days of no new COVID cases.
You know what? Everything has an impact. It just depends on when.
When you come down to an issue like this, a lot of the other things sort of pale into what you might think insignificance, and perhaps things like global warming and pollution and habitat destruction of native animals, sort of things. They're the things that happen over many years, over a reasonable number of years anyway. So it doesn't become quite as obvious that we are facing that disaster eventually. It may well be the next generation or two that are going to really suffer from that, whereas we're suffering right here and now. So it puts things into a different perspective, but it's something we probably should be thinking about, and we should accept and learn that, what the COVID, what this disease has done is, it's accelerated things so it becomes really obvious the negative impacts, whereas some of the other things take, decades or even centuries to really have that dramatic impact, but they are going to have that impact almost for sure. So we probably should think about those things a bit differently as well. And obviously people are thinking about that.
Everything isn't all doom and gloom. We are changing and adapting. This is the latest news coming out of Asia on travel.
More now on one of our top stories. Daily flights between Singapore and Hong Kong will start on the 22nd of November. Under the air travel bubble agreement, all forms of travel, including leisure, will be allowed, and passengers won't have to serve quarantine or stay-at-home notice on arrival. Well, for a closer look, we speak with Dane Cheng from the Hong Kong Tourism Board. Thanks for joining us, Dane. What impact will this travel bubble have on Hong Kong's tourism sector?
I think it will be tremendous, because this is a milestone, not only for Hong Kong, for Singapore, but also for the region, for Asia. This is a first model that an air travel bubble, which we have heard the term for so long. But once it started on the flight on the 22nd of November, then we'll see how it goes. And throughout the process, we want to make sure that the whole journey and the visitors, travelers' experience could be improved.
And Dane, what kind of safety protocols can we expect to see in tourist hotspots?
Well, basically, it's along the whole journey. From the moment you got on board the aircraft, and you get off the aircraft, and when you leave the airport on transport, going to the hotels, to the visit to our tourist attractions.
It is really interesting on how we are all responding to the pandemic. There are companies going out of business while others are making more money than they ever have. The journey of entrepreneurship is always an interesting one. In Skroo Turner's case, his wife, his son, and his daughter are all entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it's interesting having a family where, and Jude's been instrumental in building the spices portfolio up, although she does have a CEO, Dave Asif, who runs it. But I'd say the common feature, and Joe has LNDR, which is an activewear based in London, and Matt with the 99 bikes. And I think the common thing is that, and I think most of these organisations would agree, is that for whatever reason they've got, Simon Sinek calls it a just cause, that it's underlying, it's not just about making money. Making money, okay, you've got to do that down the track, because otherwise you go broke. But it is about, I suppose, caring and looking after people, and them looking after each other as well. And so that you have that cultural purpose underlying. And I think if there's one thing in an organisation that's really important, it's that, so that, that it's not just about numbers, it's not just about making money, it's about building a business. And if you look at private equity, quite often it is about numbers. And that's why the smart ones get out after 3 to 5 years, because it's not long-term sustainable. And Simon Sinek talks really well in that, The Infinite Game, about how it should be intergenerational business, a successful business, not do fantastically well for 20 years and then fades away or gets bought out or whatever, So, and I must admit, I only read that reasonably recently, and it did resonate, and particularly the just cause idea, and if you can do that as a business, I think that's the most important thing. Keeping your eye on the numbers, because you've got to make sure that you've got the cash to survive, of course.
Before we wrap this up, Flight Centre started as Top Deck, and I wanted to know how and why Graham Skroo Turner started the businesses that he has today.
Yeah, really, we started business, and me and some different partners who generally are still around, as shareholders anyway. And but and I think it's really good. And I might have told you this before, but with Top Deck, we formed that business. It wasn't really a business. It was something to do, to have some fun, to give other people some fun and all that. And I think generally it's sort of grown along into flight centres as well, that it was about travel, which is an important part, but it was really about having fun and enjoying things. And these sort of times are really tough for a lot of people. But I think most people here who are still with us, still working, still, and we have no expenses, no entertainment expenses, basically no travel expenses either. So everyone sort of pay their own way, but people still do it. They still have, and it's basically enjoying the people you work with. And it's interesting with, Spices was another good example. I think Jude and I, we like the idea of having a good food and good, small hotel in the country like was Spices Peak or Hidden Vale was. And I think that was the reason that Spices started. It wasn't started to make a lot of money. And it's not easy to make money in that area as well. But I think it means, and I think if you go to Spices and you talk to people and you eat there, generally, the people all have the same feeling that they accept that this is the underlying, well, I guess, just cause where the reason actually why it was started, and Jude certainly had a big influence on the look and feel and where we go and the fact that they're different to each other, let alone other hotels and that. It does, the rationale for starting, I think, as they feel like a founder is really important to the long term, and I think that's where the just cause needs to be thought about. And that's your case. I'm sure if you think about it, that's one of the things.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
Coming up on the Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
I'm Paul Dunn. Right now I'm in Singapore. And it's, 2 days after my birthday. There you go. It's the 2nd of December. And he said, at enlightened companies, leaders are smart enough to ask, how do we make things better for our customers? Guess what? It shouldn't take us too long to figure out that guilt is not something that we want to feel every day. We don't. Right? We just don't. It's not a good look, right? But what we do want to feel every day is joy. That's what we want to feel.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
I interviewed Graham Skroo Turner because he is the CEO of Flight Centre Travel Group. Flight Centre Travel Group is one of the world's largest travel agency groups. It has company-owned operations in 23 countries and a corporate travel management network that spans more than 90 countries. It employs more than 19,000 people globally and has a total of 2,800 businesses. Skroo Turner has started Top Deck, which was a double-decker bus that he bought in England and offered trips around Europe, Africa, and Asia. Now he is the CEO, which he came back to in 2006, of Flight Centre and has helped grow that company by leaps and bounds. Graham Turner is an entrepreneur of the highest level, a family man, and a friend.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
This is a Must Amplify production. Special thanks to every guest expert that has appeared on the show. Editing, voiceovers, and sound design by Kaylee Bunnyman and Tiago Vega. Guest research and content by Claire Gould and Corinne Castles. Project managed by Kaylee Bunnyman. Produced and hosted by me, Ronsley Vaz. For more episodes and where to listen, go to mustamplify.com/POE.
Love the polished audio docuseries style of this podcast, The Psychology of Entrepreneurship? At We Are Podcast, you can learn how to create a similar style for your own show. This revolutionary virtual event assembles podcasters, entrepreneurs, and marketers in one spot, so you're able to learn from the masters. Head straight to wearepodcast.com to reserve your spot at our next event.